morning, community. Welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson. And today we're going to have a real conversation with Dr. Deena Brown, role model, international influencer, women's empowerment expert, speaker, author, and coach. Dr. Deena, welcome.
Thank you for such a great welcome. I'm excited to be here and to really let shift get real.
Uh-oh, there you go. Well, I first want to start out by briefly telling people how I first met you. Not met, but experienced you. And we were both attending the conference of a mutual friend. And you were sitting at her right hand at the front of the table. And you just had a presence. You were quiet. You didn't say much. You were very unassuming. But you had those expressive eyes and that warm smile that our viewers are seeing right now. And I just studied you. You probably don't remember. You might have perhaps thought, is she stalking me? But no, I was studying you. And then a few months later, we met again at another event, and I arranged for a half-day discovery session with you, which literally changed the approach to my business. And then we met again for a third time. You know, they say the third time's a charm, and we were working to support an executive together. And since then, we've collaborated on a couple of projects. I've just watched your multi-dimensional transformation from the sidelines, and it's amazing to me. And we're only scratching the surface of who you are and what you're going to accomplish as an influencer and a subject matter expert in women's empowerment. So Dr. Deena, please share with us, me, the community, how your journey over the last 3 years that I've known you is like that of the butterfly, which we've talked about a lot.
I love that question because I do speak to the metamorphosis, the metamorphic journey that actually happens. And the best way that I could describe it is really at the entry point. When I met you, I had just transitioned from what I would say the caterpillar phase into the chrysalis phase. And in the chrysalis phase is where you begin to burn off all things that don't serve you, and that you go deep within in order to have a powerful dynamic transformation out. And that is the phase and the time in which I met you. And so although you weren't there at the start of the journey, you came at one of the critical aspects of the journey, of that deeper self-discovery that really began to transform. And what the world gets to see and what you get to see is the manifestation of all of that. But really what it is the change was a different way of doing things. To the transformation, which is a different way of being. And that being is rooted in knowing truly and honestly who I am. And I know we're talking about the butterfly and the caterpillar, but I'll say, pigeons don't fly with eagles and chickens don't fly at all.
Tell
Who's
the
in your
truth.
flock?
Yes, I love that. Say it again. Pigeons don't fly with eagles. Chickens don't fly at all. Who's in your flock? I love that.
Mm-hmm. And so for me, this space is really flying. And as you see butterflies, you might see them in groups, usually when they've been contained, but also when you see that the flight of that eagle, often they're solo, doesn't mean that they don't have a mate, doesn't mean that they don't often, congregate and stuff, but they're very comfortable in their own sense of I am. And what they do is what they're called to do, and that's fly.
I love that. And that actually leads me to the reason that you're here. In recognition of Thanksgiving, I've been talking all month about having an attitude of gratitude. Yes. And today I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be part of your latest project, Melanin Talks. Tell us about this global revolutionary movement that you're leading through storytelling.
Wow, Melanin Talks, again, is a key aspect of that metamorphic journey to which we spoke about already. And what I noted about the things that I had to pull back, the layers I had to uncover, and it wasn't just my layers. And I know that this is something that wasn't unique to me because the women that I coached, the women that I worked with, the platforms that I spoke on, it was a constant resonating theme about, as women, particularly Black women, we've muted ourselves for so long. And the world thinks that the world shut us down. And I'm here to tell you that that's really not the real truth, because if a Black woman truly wants to speak and rise up, she will. We muted ourselves for a variety of reasons. And so Melanin Talks really was this divine download for me, where I thought about the power of our stories, the power of our stories. And I knew that I wanted to collect our stories because our testimony is the answer key for the test that others face and deal with in life, particularly Black women, because so long we've masked our own trauma, pain, transformation, transitions in order to shine light on someone else. Even if it was another Black woman, we rarely took time to own our own truth and to shout and encourage our own selves. And so our stories got lost and entangled into others' definition of who we are. And so Melanin Talks is about truly activating, elevating, and amplifying Black women's voices through their storytelling, through the art of storytelling as they choose desire. This is the time for you to talk about you and be excited about that. And it's your narrative, about shifting the narrative off of what other people said, did, and told me why, to here's what I know as to who I am. And this is how I understand and process my coming to beingness. And so, again, all of this is really tied in together. Melanin Talks is part of that. And I knew that I wanted to do something different, especially after being on the TEDx stage and applying for TED Talks and other platforms. And I thought, inside of the narrative and description of how they would like for me to show up, the show up is rooted again on some other parameters that don't necessarily sync to the natural, innate way that I storytell,
Right.
or the part of my story I want to tell. So even in that sense, by me choosing to participate, I mute an aspect of my story in order to fit in. And I wanted to say, and I said, God, I'm a woman of faith. And I said, God, why can't we just tell our own stories? And he said, because we're waiting for you to provide the platform.
Oh, there it is. It's on you. So let me interrupt you really quickly before you get into the storytelling. You said something that I find very profound and that resonated very strongly with me. And you said, it's not necessarily that outer forces have muted the voice of the Black woman. We have muted ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
In terms of, and lately I've been thinking about, enough microaggressions have a macro impact on us.
Absolutely.
Is some of that having to do with how we've muted ourselves because of always having to deal with the accumulation of microaggressions that have at a macro level said, you know what, I'm just done? Is that part of how we've ended up muting ourselves?
Absolutely. And when I make that statement, and thank you for asking that question and really clarifying that, it doesn't mean that there's not outside triggers, but the choice, the oneness of the choice still rests with you. Good, bad, or indifferent. We don't often want to deal with the consequences that may come. And so not only for being safe, to not only just to the thrive, but even just to a point at being a level of survival and being, it was that if I choose to do this, here's the ramifications of that and how it's going to impact whether I can feed my family, whether I can live, whether I'm going to be here tomorrow. And so we mute ourselves, even though there's outside stimulus. So I do want to clarify that they're not muting us, because I want everyone to truly understand you truly have a choice.
So then let me ask you this. What's the difference between self-muting and masking?
It's just a different form of that. And so when we talk about masking, is that I actually might speak, but I speak through the lens and the voice of someone else who I think is more acceptable.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So now I want to get back to storytelling, because I know that is the major vehicle that you're going to be using for Melanin Talks.
Yes.
So without giving away any of your storytelling secret sauce, Dr. Deena, what are one or two key elements of storytelling and why are they important?
The number one singular, and I'm happy to give this away because you have to understand that you are the author. You are the key player, the director, the executive director in your story. You are. And when you own that, you can begin to own the narrative. And you can also begin to shift the narrative back into your I am instead of someone else's I told you who you are. And so the key to storytelling is, number one, identifying who are you right now in this season. Not the Facebook or Meta reflections of who you were 5 years ago, because we like to go look at those pictures when you're 10 pounds, 15 pounds lighter, and
Girl.
your hair was on fleek, or we were flying around and the world. Trust me, I do it. But who are you right now in this season?
Mhm.
And how has your story, your narrative, your story shaped the discovery of who you are and how you choose to show up right now? Period.
Yeah.
There's no good, there's no bad, there just is. And so when you do that, that helps you start in really identifying and pulling back and saying, what is my story? Literally ask yourself that. What is my story? And be quiet and because every answer is inside of you.
Yes, I have often said that we have the answers from within. And when you mentioned who are you, that triggered me, because that is an activity that I use with my clients. And we ask, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And you have to answer that question 3 different rounds with 3 different parameters around them. So when you talk about who are you, it triggered me to say, all right, who am I in this space, in this moment? And based on who I am, what capacity do I have to serve? So I love where you're going. And with that, you and I always talk a lot about the impact people can have simply by sharing their lived experiences.
Absolutely.
So when you tie together who are you and storytelling, when is it most impactful to share our lived experiences, and why?
When it happens, when you feel psychologically safe, when you desire to do so, where you desire to do so, how you desire to do so. That's when it is. I can't tell you when to share your story, because as we talked earlier from the initial onset, we talked about the transformational metamorphic journey the caterpillar takes to becoming a butterfly. Which season are you in? At the caterpillar stage, you might still be eating, intaking, filling yourself up, really to get to that point to enter the chrysalis phase, where you can then have enough fuel to do the work. To burn away, literally melt your insides and transform to uncover the truth of you, your origin story, so that you can actually begin to fly, and that your wings can, and that you can break free. Because what I don't want to miss, because I know earlier I talked about from the chrysalis to the flight, but really it's the busy work, and I mean the busy bold work, is breaking out of that chrysalis. And how you're going to get out, and how you're going to strengthen your wings, and how are you going to build, because when you're fighting to get out, it's really the building of your wings. And so when you go through things, it's an aspect of your story that really shapes your narrative and who you are and how you fly. So when you understand that we are designed to alchemize everything we've been through, to create, to develop, to really elevate our state of being, shift will happen.
So I have to share this with the audience that just before we got on and we were getting set up, I got emotional, and that's not new to this audience. They know that I'll do that, right? But there's something spiritual. There's a spiritual connection in the conversations that Dr. Deena and I have. And what you see right now, audience, it's keeping it real with Dr. Anita, real conversations with a subject matter expert. And what you see is real. And Dr. Deena, when you're talking about, the intake so that we can shed off, and understanding everything that we have gone through shapes who we are. The other day I was having a mentoring lunch with a young man, and it just came to me, we hear the quip that knowledge is power, right? Absolutely. But self-knowledge is a power source,
right,
that allows you to become whatever it is that you're intended to be.
Right.
So when we think in those terms, I know that your goal through storytelling is to inform, influence, and make an impact.
Right.
In our last few minutes, share what your vision of success for Melanin Talks will be after it's taken place next year.
There's more.
There's always more with you, Dr. Deena. Always.
There's more. As we begin to truly embrace our shifts, storytelling allows us to begin to do that, to find that comfort space, to be able to shift the narrative, shift the perspective. And telling the story is through us, it's about us, but it's going to impact more than us. And that is truly, honestly, what I see from a global perspective. As Melanin Talks is not a singular one and done.
Mm-hmm.
It literally is the seed stage. It's the seedling of a mighty, mighty, mighty oak tree that is going to spread globally and truly activate the women, the little girls and the women. And so I speak to that. And, my former life being an educator and a school administrator, people say, what about our young girls? What about our children? I said, I am talking to them. I'm talking to them and the 40-year-old woman and the 50-year-old woman who never spoke.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Say that again. Say that again. When they ask you about the little girls, you say what?
Yes, I am speaking to them, but they're inside the body of a 40, 50, 60-year-old woman who has been muted for quite a number of years. And she has yet to alchemize her pain, her trauma, her joys, her transformation. So this is not an opportunity and a platform. I told you about trauma bonding and that we're focused on that. Oh, well, no, we're talking about our triumphs and our transformations, because there's oftentimes, particularly as Black women, that we've done something great, we want to share it, but yet we mute ourselves because it goes, well, they're going to think I'm boasting. They're going to think. And so I used to always say, and I still say that, but I've shifted a little bit. Who the heck is they? Well, guess who the they is? The they is you. The they is you. That's the amygdala.
Yeah.
That's that crypt keeper.
Back here.
All your pains and all the storytellings, all the programming that you actually have internalized. And so you need to shift into it in order to disrupt that program so you can shift past it to walk the path that you were called to walk, and understanding that it's always going to be shifting, but you can truly hold your ground when you're rooted in your I am.
Dr. Deena, you used a lot of technical terms on a very high level with us today. Give us a little bit about your background. I know that you mentioned you've been a school administrator, a coach, and author, but give us some insight into your background that you borrow from and leverage to create the programs that you do.
Well, first and foremost, I was brilliant at birth. I tell everybody
we know that. Everybody is.
That all the time. I tell them that because and they say, they go, and it's a chuckle and a jest, but it's a truth. And I'll say that there's always been this divine knowing. And my ability to learn, I love to learn, I love to read, I love to pick up things. And so when you talk about my academic background, having a bachelor's degree in economics, my master's in education, and my doctorate in ed leadership and research, those were the bonus accoutrements that were added. But the knowingness and the curiosity and the thirst for this additional knowledge had always been there. And I always just kept saying, gosh, I seem to kind of know this, or I gravitate that. And even my study of neuroscience and understanding, neuropsychology to the point. And I began to study and take that on. And for like this much of a minute, I almost went back to school because I thought I need to become a psychologist because I love how this brain works and understanding, because the truth is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So I began to do the work for me, because I tell people, I've been through some things. And I said, ooh, I need to figure this out. And in doing that external work of researching, pulling in books and going, which resources do I need? Much like the caterpillar deciding on which leaf it's going to ingest that's going to nurture the journey, right? Not all caterpillars eat off the same leaf, and different ones actually gravitate to certain ones. But that's neither here nor there. You can tell I love caterpillars, and I've done a lot of research in that. And so all of those pieces kind of come back. And when I understood them in a bigger space, it's led to that. So you've got the neuro nerd sitting in front of you. You've got, the educational leader. You've got the business strategist, because I wanted to be a corporate attorney initially. I was going to go to school and do a JD and MBA and go into corporate law and do mergers and acquisitions. I wanted to be Richard Gere from Pretty Woman, not Julia Roberts, because I was like, I'm going to pick stuff and organize it and give it back and make money. And then I thought, what's the truth of this narrative though? What do I want to use the money for? And I said, well, because when I went to school, I had wonderful programs. I have an international baccalaureate diploma and stuff like that. So I had always been in these places, but I didn't understand why other children, particularly other Black children, didn't have the opportunity to be in these classes to learn differently.
Mhm.
We went to the Getty to study art, not in the book.
Mhm.
We literally went to the Getty Museum to study the artwork and did all those things. And so I said, well, I'm going to make all of this money so I can give scholarships and I could go help change the world of education. And I was sitting there one day and I said, but you're probably the greatest change you could give them. And so I was going to grad school. I flipped my major at that time and got a degree in education to do that. So when I say that these built on parts, some of it's book learning, much of it's intuitive knowing and being quiet and still long enough to discover it. Another big chunk of that is lived experiences.
Right.
To do that, but it's rooted down to where I am now, to going, okay, I know the answer's there, and now I offer myself up to the opportunity to experience it. And so that's what I say when I start my morning. Here's what I desire to experience. I put intention into my day, and then I reflect on it at night. And I look at what my shift goals are, and you'll hear me talk a lot about shift. Why? Because sometimes we've been taught to pivot. You've heard that word. Words matter, everybody. Listen, words matter. What you speak to your higher self, it ain't matter. And we have to pivot. But then you have to understand, what is the purpose of a pivot? In machinery and life is to anchor you, to help you swing around and look to see from different angles and viewpoints. Even the pivot joint on something, it's to anchor it so that it can swivel and turn. But how are you going to move from where you are to where you desire to be? It requires a shift.
That's right. That's right. And you and I use that acronym very, very similarly. You have different definitions of it. I have different definitions of it. But from day one, when we had our first coaching conversation, I recognized that there were so many similarities. And I'm just waiting for the day when someone looks at me and says, "Are you Dr. Deena?" I'm like, "No, I'm the other one. I'm Dr. Nita. She's my mentor."
You better stop. You have your own powerhouse of skills and truly admirable methodologies in the way that you approach business and life. And that's what I've learned. And I was having a conversation last night with someone, and they go, "Well, how did you here?" I said, in all this, it was a journey. I said, and where I am today, it was work to get here, and I'm not going back. Yep. I said, but at the end of it, if you really want to know the secret, super secret sauce, not only to storytelling, telling our stories, but living our big, bold life today, it was me saying, I love me. And if you do, it's a bonus. Yeah. That's it. That was it. And when I say I love me, I love the flaws. I love my growth. I love that. And so if I have a situation or a shiftuation, I call them, right? If I have that, I don't attach the experience to my I am. I recognize the experience for what it is as an experience.
Yes.
Not an identifier to my truth.
Amen. And when I'm coaching leaders, I try to get them to remember two things. Number one, do not confuse who you are with what you do. But at the same time, as much as possible, try to get some who-do alignment. Who you are shows up in what you do. And I think that's critical.
Absolutely.
So the last probing question that I have for you is this. So I introduced you through several different roles as a role model, international influencer, women's empowerment expert, speaker, author, coach. And I'm sure there are other things on this list that I have yet to discover for myself. But when you think about where we started, and then I just asked you, tell us a little bit about your background that informs who you are in your approach. My question for you is this. Who are you, Dr. Deena C. Brown?
I am love. I am light. I am joy. I am peace. I am thriving. I am excited. I am living the power of my I am, because I've learned to alchemize all my states of being to one singular point, which is and who is Deena in this singular moment in time.
And for you, what's the difference between doing and being? We talked a lot about busy work, and
I love it. Thank you. Right? Which leads me to one of my current projects and my memoir, and some of this you'll be able to read in my memoir that's going to be coming out in the spring.
Dr. Deena, are you old enough to have a memoir? You're not 80.
Meow. Yes, I am. I'm covering, these amazing 50 years that I've been on the planet.
Mhm.
And, or like I fondly share, 29 plus tax and gratuity. Um, and it's really about the shifts in life that have led to orgasmic growth, is what I call it, in life, love, and leadership. To be able to do that. And so the difference between being and doing is that the beingness is really about our feminine energy. It's our state of duality, getting into also the spiritual shifts and understanding that is that we are always in a sense of duality, our masculine and feminine. People are like, I'm not, yes, sure, you have a mom and a daddy. Both came together. That's inside of you. Yes, it is. If you want me to break it down for you. So you always have a masculine and a feminine aspect to your very nature. However you want to break it, it's not woo-woo, it's spiritual. It can even I can break it down to you in science and chromosomal development. You have masculine and you have feminine. And so the masculine from an energetic space and divine space is really about the doing. Hence why in the workplace, we begin to see women want to take on more masculine traits because they say that's what's going to get me promoted. And you hear the languaging to that, even in corporate America, even with leaders that I get to work with, we both work in the ID&E space. And I always say ID&E because I talk about inclusion, diversity, and equity, because we need to have inclusion, which really stems and drives the diversity to lead to equity. And so I begin to even shift that narrative for myself. But we talk about the doing of it. And that's very masculine in nature. The beingness is very feminine in nature. And that's the nurturing, that's the love, that's the comforting. And when we look at what I would describe now as traditional roles, not the roles or the only roles, but traditional masculine and feminine roles that many of us probably experienced. If we see our mothers, they're going to come and fix and love on us and hug it out and, make it better. And our dad is going to hunt and, gather and bring that in, where the mom takes care of that. And so what we have to realize is that that's always a part of us. It shifts over the course of our narrative, but the doing is the action piece. The being is more of that other spiritual connected piece. So. And I'm not going to drive it into a whole nother spiritual discussion of elevation. But what I want you to understand is that when I come to the stage and I come to the platform, I bring the wholeness of me, which is both.
And that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear the wholeness of you. So now that Christmas is less than a month away, community, I'm seeing the chance to participate in Melanin Talks as a gift to myself, both personally and professionally. Personally, I'm going to take the prep and the day of event as like almost a mini retreat for myself. But professionally, because of the one-on-one coaching that I'll be getting from Dr. Anita, that's going to enhance the way I connect as a speaker, a panelist, and as a facilitator. So Dr. Anita, Dr. Deena, that being said, okay, so that was a verbal faux pas, but it's because I see so much of myself in you, and I see
I love it. I love it.
Me and you.
Love it. To me, it was an affirmation.
Well, it's
an affirmation of what you're birthing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So where do other women go to gift themselves with this opportunity to be coached by you, to be a Melanin Talks speaker or supporter, and to enjoy all that comes with the experience?
You can go to melanintalks.info, MELANIN.info, and gain other information on how to connect there. But probably the best way, and I'd say this because you can get access to my links, if you go to my Instagram at Dr. Deena Speaks, DRDEENASPEAKS, Dr. Deena Speaks, and you click on that Shorby link in my bio, it'll give you the connectedness and the points of all of those to link into my podcast that's giving a rebirth, because the opportunities they're limited and they're very structured. I've shifted out of one-to-one coaching in that sense, unless it's a part of, again, what my narrative is right now, to be able to do that. And I find that that's the best way to do that. But reach out, send a message. I'm happy to jump on a 5-minute conversation. Yes, I said 5 because it only takes that for us to make a decision. I'm not spending 15, 20, 30 million, 11 hours talking about it. And that's the work that we'll do, because even in 5 minutes, we've already gotten a chance to deduce whether or not that we would be able to work together. But more importantly, come to Melanin Talks, March 26th. I tell you that to experience it. Mm-hmm. And I really, truly, honestly want anyone, before they say, oh, I want to do this, to literally experience this for themselves as the first one, so that they can see the infinite possibilities of their own story. Because if you're in the room, we're going to give you a little shift start to begin to unpack your own story. So definitely get in the room that day on March 26th when tickets become available, because they're very limited. It's an intimate, dynamic powerhouse of an experience.
Now, Dr. Deena, I'm fixing to put you on the spot, because those who may not be familiar with you, those who've not had the pleasure of hearing you speak, in particular at an ENP event, you are known as the anchor in those tag team events. And you just have a way of just pulling everything together from various speakers. So if you had to do that for yourself today, what are some of the highlights of our discussion that you want to leave with our listeners?
The singular highlight I'd want to leave, because to me it's really about the action, is tell your own story on your terms, when you feel comfortable doing so, where you feel comfortable doing so, to whom you feel comfortable doing so. And in order to tell your own story, first, number one, identify what is that story. Investigate all of the aspects that led to you, really, the ingredients is what I would call it, to your actual story. And once you've identified that, and once you've done the investigation, really begin to realize that what are you going to implement intentionally in your life? So not only you're living your divine narrative today, that you're sharing it to impact the tomorrow.
Beautiful. Dr. Deena, it has been absolutely delightful to have you on the show. Again, community, our theme this month is gratitude, and I'm so grateful for your work in the realm of women's empowerment, for the lessons I've personally learned as a result of being in your space. And most importantly, Dr. Deena, I am grateful for your mentorship, your friendship, and your support. Thank you so much for sharing your insightful words of wisdom with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Community, again, we are rolling into the Christmas season. Ladies, I encourage you, gift yourself with the experience of Melanin Talks. If you're not able to attend, think of another woman that you can gift the experience to. It will be life-changing. Even 5 minutes with Dr. Deena. She wasn't playing when she said all you need is 5 minutes. 5 minutes with her will change your life. I'm sure you've been impacted profoundly by our conversation today. Not only in the moment, but in the future, you'll think and go, I think I remember that from Dr. Deena. So community, until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.